Good morning. I'm Mayor Tim Baldermann of the Village of New Lenox. I'm here today with one of the finest police departments in the state of Illinois. Our chief is going to give an update on a vehicular hijacking and robbery case that occurred in our community on June 20th. At that point, after he discusses the update, I'll be back up here to make some comments. Before I do, I want to say thank you to our chief, our police administration, our patrol division, our investigative division. Having 22 years of law enforcement experience, I know what a good police department looks like. And the citizens of New Lenox are very, very fortunate to have these incredible men and women serving them here in this community. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our police chief, Louis Alessandrini.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll do my best to go over the incident that took place last Tuesday, as the mayor said, and lead it up to where we are today. We do have two of the three individuals responsible for this crime currently in custody, and I will go over the steps and how we got there. It is an open, ongoing investigation, as we are still searching for a third offender in this case. Last Tuesday at approximately 6:15 a.m., a 71-year-old male Uber driver arrived in New Lenox to provide a ride to one of our citizens who was traveling to the airport. He arrived in town a few minutes early and parked his vehicle in front of the victim's house. A short time later, a white Hyundai Accent passed him and did a U-turn and returned a few seconds later. This was all captured on the Uber driver's dash cam. This white Hyundai Accent parked directly in front of the Uber driver, and immediately two male black offenders got out of the car armed with handguns, wearing hoodies and masks and gloves as well. One of the subjects was wearing a white hoodie, one was wearing a red one, and a third subject remained inside the car wearing a dark green colored hooded sweatshirt as well. Our Uber driver was forcefully removed from the car at gunpoint. He was struck in the head during the robbery, and the two individuals that exited the car and attempted to steal his vehicle entered the car and began to drive away. They had difficulty operating the vehicle. They abandoned the car a few houses down. They returned to the white Hyundai Accent and fled the area. Our victim had his cell phone stolen, his money clip, and his keys. We responded to the area and immediately began an investigation. It was immediately determined that the white Hyundai Accent was stolen out of Chicago the day prior. We began searching for the victim's cell phone. It was located on Route 30. The victim's keys were later recovered later in the day by a local resident and turned into the police department. Our victim was transported to the Silver Cross Hospital by New Lenox Fire Protection District and treated for minor injuries. He is doing okay right now. We then shared video footage from the Uber driver's dash cam and sent it out to neighboring agencies in an attempt to identify and locate these individuals. We immediately gained information that this stolen Hyundai was still being used and driven throughout the day in Chicago. We had information that it was in the 22nd District in particular. Our investigators went to the 22nd District of Chicago, made contact with the TAC unit out there, shared the information that we had, and began looking for the offenders. Later that same evening, last Tuesday night, Illinois State Police saw the vehicle in Chicago and a pursuit ensued. CPD joined in assistance, and 4 subjects fled from that vehicle. 2 female juveniles, 1 male juvenile, and 1 male adult. They were taken into custody a short time later. Our investigators returned to Chicago and interviewed them on scene. They denied involvement in our carjacking and were only charged with crimes related to being in a stolen motor vehicle and related to fleeing and eluding from police. That vehicle was towed back to our station. We recovered evidence out of that car, some evidence that's still being processed. We recovered 2 masks that we believe were worn by 2 of the 3 offenders. We recovered the victim's money clip from the car, in addition to other evidence which I can't speak about at this time. The investigation continued. On Friday, June 23rd, our investigators returned to that area and began to search for the offenders, additional video footage, and any other information they could obtain to identify these individuals. They obtained poll camera footage that was recorded approximately 45 minutes after our carjacking in the area of 110th and Throop of 3 male individuals, one wearing a white hoodie, one wearing a red hoodie, another wearing a dark green hoodie, only now they were unmasked. They obtained photos from this video and began canvassing the area in an attempt to identify them. It was learned that these 3 individuals hung out at a gas station in the area of 111th and Racine, 110th and Racine, in that area. They then proceeded to that area in an attempt to identify them. While speaking with employees there, they were advised that they were recognized and that they were frequent customers of that gas station. Our investigators then set up surveillance on that gas station, and not much longer, a short time later, a car arrived, and 2 of our carjackers were inside of this vehicle. Our officers, there were only 4 of them on scene at the time, immediately approached the vehicle and detained the occupants. A handgun was recovered from the car with an extended magazine believed to be used in our carjacking. Clothing worn in our carjacking was recovered, and in fact, one of the offenders at least had the same clothing on. Everybody was taken into custody. The vehicle was towed back to our police department, as were 1 male 17-year-old juvenile and 1 19-year-old adult. They were brought back to the police department for further investigation and further analysis of more evidence. And in working with the Will County State's Attorney's Office, we now have those 2 individuals charged, and as I mentioned earlier, we continue to search for a 3rd. The 17-year-old male juvenile is currently in custody at River Valley Juvenile Detention Facility in Joliet. He is charged with 3 counts of aggravated vehicular hijacking, 4 counts of armed robbery, 3 counts of attempted aggravated vehicular hijacking, 1 count of aggravated battery, 1 count of unlawful use of a weapon, and he remains in custody at this time. There's still consideration being considered as to whether or not he will be tried as an adult. The 19-year-old we now know to be Timothy Gaines, also out of Chicago, was charged with 3 counts of aggravated vehicular hijacking, 4 counts of armed robbery, 3 counts of attempted aggravated vehicular hijacking, 1 count of aggravated battery. He's being held on $1 million bond and is currently in custody at the Will County Adult Correction Facility. 1 offender, again, remains at large. We have solid leads into this individual, and we hope to have him in custody soon. The resident that requested this Uber was unrelated to this crime. And the 4 individuals arrested in Chicago in the stolen motor vehicle at this time appear to have no connection to our carjacking. That's about all the information I can share on that at this moment while the investigation is ongoing. I'd like to thank Illinois State Police, Chicago Police Department for their assistance, the Will County State's Attorney's Office as well. And most importantly, I'd like to thank the members of this great department, many who have put in long hours, some of who are standing behind me at this moment, others who couldn't be here today. But without their hard work, their dedication, and their professionalism, we would not be standing here in front of you telling you of 2 arrests. I'd also like to thank the community, everyone that called and provided ring camera footage or just information on this case. It was instrumental as well. So thank you to the community. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Mayor Baldermann. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. The Chief is right. This was a great community effort. What also needs to be touched on is this happened at 6:15 in the morning in a residential area. And I know personally of some children that were on their way walking to summer school right on the block where this was taking place. So when these things happen, there are many potential victims that could be involved. 6:15 in the morning this took place. Our police department did a great job, and again, as the chief said, thank you to the Illinois State Police and the Chicago Police Department, who always work very closely with our agency. Unfortunately, they have to do that too frequently, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But our officers being at the scene and being able to apprehend 2 of these 3 offenders was not luck. It's incredible police work, tracking these leads down, staying up long hours and getting on it, and they did just that. There were 4 of our police officers that were at that police station at 110th and Racine when these offenders were taken into custody. That's 4 police officers that were not in the village limits of New Lenox protecting our residents because they had to be out in Chicago once again looking for criminals that have come from Cook County. And that's what I want to talk about now. This may seem like deja vu if you saw the press conference that we did a year or so ago about vehicular carjacking that took place in New Lenox. We talked about the offenders in that case and their long criminal history out of Cook County with very little, if any, adjudication, putting them behind bars where they belonged. In the last 3 years, the village of New Lenox experienced 1 homicide, 3 vehicular hijackings, and 1 attempted vehicular hijacking. Every one of those cases involved career criminals out of Cook County. In fact, I asked the chief and the deputy chief to compile this information over the last 3 years, and we had 57 cases, of which the homicide, the vehicular hijackings, 6 robberies, 20 motor vehicle thefts, and 26 burglaries took place. If it were not for the offenders on this board here to the left, as well as some of those that we are still looking to apprehend, most of those crimes would not have been committed. These criminals, these career criminals, not only reside in Cook County, but committed numerous crimes in Cook County. Of the 16 individuals that are listed on this board, they have 149 prior arrests with 76 prior convictions. 76 convictions for 16 offenders. Many of the crimes that they were arrested for, and I say arrested for, require minimum sentences of 3 years or greater. If you even took the 76 convictions and tacked 3 years onto those and averaged it out amongst these 16 offenders, that would mean that each one of them should have been doing at least 14 years behind bars. If the state's attorney's office in Cook County wasn't constantly downgrading charges and accepting pleas to make cases probationable, if they instead pushed the issue and held these criminals accountable, we'd have a young man still alive in this community. We would have innocent victims of carjackings, 2 of whom had 2 young children under the age of 5, both had 2 young children under the age of 5, in their cars as guns were brandished in their face. If the state's attorney's office, and I lay it right at the top, would have done their job, these crimes would not have taken place in our community. And it's not just happening in New Lenox. It's happening all over the collar counties. Certainly it's happening in Cook County on a regular basis, but all over the collar counties. Of these serious offenses that I'm speaking about, one of the offenders was convicted of armed robbery, sentenced to 8 years in prison, and served less than a year and a half, and then continued to go out and commit more crimes. So unless the state's attorney's office is prosecuting these cases to the fullest, and I don't know how many assistant state's attorneys have to quit because they can no longer stand the policies of the state's attorney's the current state's attorney, unless our jails, our judges and our jails are holding these people accountable and making them serve the time for the crimes that they're committing, all law-abiding citizens in Cook County and in the collar counties are going to continue to be subjected to this criminal, violent behavior. When I talk about 76 convictions, most of those convictions are for violent, personal crimes against people. We're not talking just about traffic offenses. In fact, although all people are considered innocent until they have their day in court, one of our suspects in this case was arrested in Cook County just 10 months ago. Just 10 months ago for criminal trespass to a vehicle and possession of ammunition without a FOID card, and that case was stricken on leave, dismissed. If that weren't the case, perhaps we wouldn't have had this vehicular hijacking and a 71-year-old man wouldn't have been beat over the head with a weapon. So not only is the state's attorney's office in Cook County responsible for a lot of what's happening in the collar counties and in Cook County itself, I take note of something that Governor Pritzker said last week on a news program, where the governor said his answer for the rampant crime that's taking place in Chicago and Cook County and spilling out into the collar counties is prevention programs, social programs. I would remind the governor that for years, the state of Illinois has spent billions of dollars on social programs that have failed. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should not support that type of activity. Every child deserves a good education. The state of Illinois fails miserably when it comes to helping people with mental health issues. We need to do that. But when the reporter pressed the governor further and said, that's a long-term solution, what are you going to do about the short-term solution? What he said is, the city of Chicago needs to hire 1,500 new police officers, but there's a job shortage and nobody wants to take the job. He further went on to say that 20-some years ago there was a lot of hiring, and so it's just natural that these people are retiring now. Let me tell you, that is entirely untrue. Although there may be job shortages, there has never been a lack of people interested in wanting to be police officers until the last few years. We even see it here in a nice community like ours. And the reason that is, Governor Pritzker, and to anyone else who supports these policies, is because there has been an absolute attack on law enforcement with some of the legislation that's been passed and the horrible policies of the state's attorney's office of Cook County. And why are these officers retiring with 20 years on a job, 22 years on a job? That's not normal. Normally, an officer wants to work 30 years to max out, but they don't. They can't roll the dice anymore. That when they're out there trying to do their job and protecting people, they become the criminal, and the criminal becomes the victim. In any profession, there are examples of bad law enforcement, and I can tell you, there is nobody who's more ashamed of a police officer that violates his oath other than a good police officer, who the overwhelming majority of the men and women who wear the badge are great police officers. But it doesn't matter. In this day and age, in this state, it doesn't matter. The police officer is immediately a suspect by those who look to prosecute, and the criminal is the victim. This isn't an issue of Republican and Democrat. Although these liberal policies are passed by Democrats in the state of Illinois, the victims of these crimes are Republicans, Democrats, people who couldn't care less about politics. They are white, they are black, they are brown. You go into any minority community in Chicago, and they are begging for more police officers, begging for some assistance. They are tired of seeing their children and grandchildren shot while sitting on a porch or watching TV in their living room. This is a real problem. My responsibility as the mayor of New Lenox is to stand up for the 30,000 people that I represent. And I can tell you once again that we do have a very safe community. This is 3 years worth of serious crime that we're talking about. And although it doesn't happen very often, and although it almost exclusively happens by career criminals out of Cook County, that doesn't help the mother who lost her son. That doesn't help the mother who had a gun stuck in her face with 2 small children in the car. That doesn't help the man who's just trying to earn a living at 71 years of age when he gets pistol whipped over the head by 2 thugs. All of us have a responsibility to stand up and demand action. We must. I don't care how many phone calls have to be made to the governor's office, how many phone calls have to be made to your state legislators, how many phone calls have to be made to the state's attorney's office. This cannot just be something we talk about in the moment and dismiss. Because the way things are going, any one of us could be the next victim. Any one of us. It doesn't matter where you live, what the color of your skin is, or who you vote for. Until we take crime seriously and we punish those that are continually committing these crimes, we're all in danger. I want to say once again to the people of New Lenox, thank you for being such a great supportive community. Thank you for supporting our police officers. They deserve it. They work hard. They do a tremendous job. But I'm getting really tired as the mayor of having my officers have to leave our border going to the same locations over and over again to arrest criminals that should have been in jail in the first place. Chief, thank you to your administration, to your officers. They do a tremendous, tremendous job. And I'm hoping that we can stop having press conferences like this one of these days because it's entirely unnecessary. And if they did their job in Cook County, it's entirely avoidable. Thank you.